Okay, we will go ahead and get started on our January 22nd Planning Commission meeting. And first, I'd like to lead everyone in the flag salute. Would you all please stand? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we'll go ahead and do roll call.
Mr. Sevison?
Present.
Mr. Gray? Mr. Moss?
Here.
Mr. Johnson?
Here.
Mr. Nader?
Here.
Mr. Ricucci?
Here.
Mr. Denayo?
Here. Okay, we'll go ahead and have our report from the Planning Director, EJ.
Good morning. EJ Valdi with the Planning Services Division. I don't really have much to report since we met just 2 weeks ago. The Board of Supervisors, they met up in Tahoe this past Tuesday. The only land use item on there was the an update on the Tahoe area plan that's going on. And today the board is having a special meeting on the homeless issue, which is going on concurrently with your meeting right now. For Planning Commission, we have 2 meetings that were tentatively scheduled for February. One was on the 5th. We're most likely going to cancel that meeting. And then the next meeting will be February 26th. So we'll put that on your calendar. And that's all I have. So if there's any questions, we can get underway.
Yeah, I do have a question. As far as the application for the Costco,
Yes.
it ran into a little bump in the road with the city of Auburn. And so I guess what my question is the county going to progress as they planned on Costco with the initiation of the CEQ and ultimately?
I think, and if Karen wants to jump in there.
I do indeed.
Okay.
Just to advise the commission, the county has been formally served with 2 different lawsuits. One by a nonprofit group, if my memory serves correctly, the Auburn Highway 49 Association. I may have the title somewhat incorrect. And yesterday we were formally served by the city of Auburn. Both groups are challenging the board's action on December 9th, which was to authorize the execution of an option to lease with Costco. Costco has been named in both lawsuits. So we will now be proceeding under, and both are asserting that the county failed to comply with CEQA. With respect to that, I would prefer to defer questions about the Costco application until we have commenced the formal, there's a lot of steps in a CEQA lawsuit, including an early mandatory settlement conference that will be happening within 45 days of being served. I'm going off of the City of Auburn's service of yesterday. So I think we'll be able to flesh out more and perhaps provide reports to the commission after we go through those initial processes of preparing the record, settlement conference, et cetera, et cetera. So I'd prefer to defer on a response to that right now due to the litigation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. No other questions? Thank you, Jay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, would anyone in the public like to comment to the Planning Commission on any issues other than what's before us today? Okay, come on up and state your name and what you want to talk about.
Morning.
Good morning.
My name is Kevin Stevenson. I'm the owner of Cask Wines. We currently operate a production facility within the town of Loomis, but we also operate a tasting room on the Flower Farm property about 4 miles east of town near Folsom Lake. I know a lot of you are familiar with that. I was recently elected president of the Placer County Vintners Association, and we held our first meeting of the year just a couple of days ago. My reason for coming before you today is simply to express what I would call a unanimous concern among the PCVA members with respect to some of the recent wording changes that have been made to the draft winery ordinance that's currently being considered by the county, primarily as it relates to our day-to-day tasting room activities. When the process started, I'm sure you all remember Phil Maddox from Lone Buffalo was tasked with, by the PCVA with drafting a set of proposed revisions to the existing ordinance. That was meant to serve primarily as an outline to planning for major concerns with the ordinance as it exists today and was drafted several years ago. Early in the process, many of these concerns were addressed by the draft ordinance. Recently, I would say very recently, we've become a little bit frustrated with the way the workshop and the MAC process has played out, because although it's perhaps been beneficial for hearing general concerns from the public, the process has not proved as helpful in explaining to planning, that includes the supervisor, the commission, as well as the department, the detailed and unique aspects of operating a winery, running a tasting room, and most importantly, I would say making money at it so that we have a viable long-term tax revenue generating wine industry in the county. And as a consequence, we feel it's been difficult to draft actual verbiage in the ordinance that reflects the realities on the ground. And to do that, frankly, we need perhaps a more face-to-face approach. I think a lot of this is, our concerns have come to pass very recently as a result of the MAC process, which frankly I wish a lot of us had been more involved in. I can address that if you'd like. But my purpose for coming today, frankly, is to humbly request that we take a brief pause from the process as it has played out, and perhaps be allowed to meet directly with planning. That would include the commission as well as the department directly to discuss in detail our concerns with the current verbiage and how we might move forward to address some of those concerns. I have copies of, if I could, copies of a revised revision. This is an update to the revision recommendations that Phil Maddox had originally presented several months ago. We tried to clarify some verbiage to make it fit more in line with where we felt like the planning verbiage was going and to address some of the concerns of our previous draft. Anyway, that's all I really had to say. I wouldn't say there's a sense of panic among the PCVA members, although we sort of came out of a very difficult, stressful harvest and through the holidays, and we've all sort of regrouped, and the verbiage has been a little bit concerning to us. And I, for one, will fall on the sword personally for not being a little more involved with the MAC process. I have attended all the workshops that we've had here. I found those to be a little frustrating. I appreciate the idea behind them, but in terms of actually putting word to paper, it's been a little bit frustrating for some of us. Not through anybody's fault, but I just feel like that's some part of the process that's been missing, because it is such a detailed, complicated business, multifaceted. It's tough to get up and explain in 60 seconds. One winery stands up and a neighbor stands up and complains about something. It's not very productive from our standpoint. So anyway, we'd like the chance to meet directly with the commission in a detailed format that we might, maybe for an hour or two, discuss very specific ideas, and also, frankly, to bring data and personal experiences, including financial, if we have to talk about this issue, because it's a difficult business, and we really want to have a viable wine industry, and we're very concerned right now. Anyway.
Oh, okay. I
Happy
think
to
I
answer
know what
questions.
the answer to meeting with us directly, because we're a public body, so it'd be a public meeting or something set up with staff, I guess.
Chairman, yeah, if I could jump in. The Vintners Association, they did contact county staff, and they actually met with us last Monday. There were 4 individuals, part of the Vintners Association, that met with us. They did present some changes. We looked at those. I think there is some merit to some of those changes, but the question is what form do those get presented. So one suggestion for the commission is that we do hold another workshop, so these can be vetted. That'd probably be the best way to have those changes made, and we could do that as early as 2 weeks from now, February 5th, or at the second meeting in February, the 26th, I think I just said.
26.
Yeah. So if the commission has an appetite for that, we'd be happy to get with the vintners and get a staff report put together and have one more final workshop.
What's the commission? Well, you were talking about the next one being.
The next one being canceled.
26. Yeah, so it'd be the 26th.
Right, and
So you'd be.
I would be in
Yeah.
favor of hearing some more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would too. I don't think we should schedule a special meeting or a
Yeah.
meeting that's now sort of been canceled. It'd be nice on the next meeting at the end of February.
Would that meet your
Well,
requirement?
we'll certainly make ourselves available.
Okay.
Okay.
okay, we'll go ahead and put that on the agenda for the February 26th. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Is there anybody else that would like to address the commission? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and go to our item number 1, Rogers variance, appeal of zoning administrator's denial of a variance. And Melanie, I guess that's that.
Good morning. The item before you is an appeal of the zoning administrator's denial of the Rogers variance. The proposed project would allow for the construction of a shed 1 foot from the east property line, the placement of a barn, a 400 square foot barn, 8 feet from the east property line, and for the placement of an animal enclosure on the northeast corner of the property on north and east property lines. On October 16th, there was a zoning administrator hearing whereby the zoning administrator heard the Rogers variance and chose to deny the variance. And on the 23rd of October, the zoning administrator received an appeal of that decision, and that appeal was based on the appellant's statement that there were special circumstances on the property, including the topography, existing structures on the property, as well as leach fields and a pond. And he also stated that the variance would not constitute a grant of special privileges because there are other properties in the area that have similar construction, including properties that have buildings without building permits, and another property that has a variance to the east, what is the east property line for this property. The zoning administrator found that there were other buildable areas on this property, and therefore there was no need to have a variance on the property, and also found that after being instructed not to continue building the shed after being told that it was a violation and that he needed to get a variance and a building permit, the appellant continued to construct the shed. And based on that and finding that there were no special circumstances on the property, the zoning administrator chose to deny the variance. And staff has found, following this appeal, that that the zoning administrator was correct, and as a result, staff recommends approval, or excuse me, staff recommends that you uphold the zoning administrator's denial of the project, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Melanie, you originally supported the variance, and then you now have obviously changed your position. Is it just that you're now supporting the denial and new evidence that has come forward? Is that the reason for the change?
That's correct. After the variance was brought forward, there were other things that were looked at on the property that made it necessary to recommend denial. And we're also taking forward the zoning administrator's decision for denial based on what the zoning administrator had found at the hearing.
Melanie, if you could you go through the slides just so the commission has a better idea of the property itself and where the structures are located?
Yeah. The structures in question are the shed, which is this part right here, and that's the one that's 1 foot from the property line. The other structure is the barn here, and that is 8 feet from the property line. And then this is the animal enclosure just connected to the barn, and then it's on the north and east property line. It just basically comes from here and then continues on to those property lines.
See, I have a question.
Go ahead.
When was the barn constructed?
The barn was constructed prior to 2011, and then the other structure actually was constructed in 2011.
Would the barn require a building permit?
Yes.
And also the structure would require a building permit?
Yes.
And so I guess just a question of the process. In the process, when they review these for a building permit, do they review a map or something that shows location and setbacks and that kind of stuff?
That's correct.
And so were either of these structures issued a building permit?
No. There were applications for a building permit, but neither one has been approved, partially because the variance, there needs to be a decision on the variance before there can be a final on those building permits.
Okay. The other question is, it's been mentioned in the report that there's other sites on the property that could accommodate these buildings.
That's correct.
I don't know if you have the complete map there, but where are those?
The area that was pointed out by the zoning administrator as an alternate area for construction is this portion of the property right here.
See, I'm having trouble finding the red dot.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's not exactly. You want me to? I can point at it. Oh, I like that. Yeah, a nice green one.
Now you gotta look at a green one.
So, yeah, okay, hopefully you can see that one. This is the area right here that was identified as an alternate area for construction.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Melon? Maybe just for myself, I know there are structures that can be built without permits, and it's a square footage and shade shelter type deal for animals.
That's correct.
Is it
Well,
200 square feet or something like that?
Our standards for the necessity of the building permit is anything that's under 6 feet in height, less than 120 square feet in size, and not permanently attached to the ground.
Melanie, which building is this? Is this the shed or the?
That's the shed.
So that's the one that they built, and during construction,
Yeah,
they stopped building it and they kept building it.
that's correct.
Okay.
I have a question to follow up with Richard's. Was the building permits issued at the time they started construction, or was it after the fact they asked for permits?
It was after the fact.
Okay, so was it after the inspection by the county revealed the issue?
No, there was a complaint filed with
Right.
code enforcement.
Oh, yeah, code enforcement went out, and then
Yeah.
that was the time when the permit was, came in, a request, right?
Correct.
Jeff, did you have?
Yeah, just to further clarify, both of these buildings were built without permits. So not until there was code enforcement action did the appellant come in and apply for permits.
Do you have a big picture of an overhead satellite view? Or
Yes,
something?
yes, I
Can
do.
you go to it, because
I'll move on from that one. This
Is that the barn, that last picture?
This is the shed. I think I need some batteries in this.
What's that there? Is that the shed?
This is the shed.
Okay,
Better than my house.
How do we, I mean, I see in the pictures here, that's an air-conditioned structure. I mean, this is a very fancy shed, or is shed really the appropriate term for that structure?
There have been different designations for this structure. We don't have a building permit on it yet, so I can't quite go into the details. There is electricity to the structure.
One question, and maybe that picture does it. Where the rock is that their property, or is that the adjacent neighbor's property? What's, from this angle?
That's the property. This is looking northeast, so the east property line.
It's right in back of it.
Yeah, this is the east property line moving this way.
Okay, so, because I see, it drops off there, and so it's a foot that way, where the other little, whatever that building, well house or whatever, I guess, I don't know what that.
If you go to the slide right before this one, and go back one slide, it will show the other side of the shed, which almost looks like a different building because of the siding, but. So there's the opposite side of the shed.
And that's
property line. So the property line going down, I mean, if they move the shed down the hill.
I think the better.
To the side, I guess, if this is the other property.
I'm going to try to get to I think the site plan might help a little. Okay, here we go. So this is the barn, or the shed right here, which we were just looking at. This is what I think you're talking about, where it's sloping down a little bit there.
Okay, but if the shed was just moved to the left from where it is.
Right, exactly. There is
I mean, where it says building right there, if it moved over there, it's going to be on the same slope as it was on the other right.
It would be on the same slope, but that is actually graded right here, and this is flattened. So you could actually move the structure in that direction without it being an issue.
Because I guess in looking at it, where the barn is, where it says 12 feet, if it just shifted on the fence line over, is that, it doesn't drop off there? Is it the same thing with the barn where it says 8 feet?
It's the same thing, yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, let's get clarification on it, because the previous picture that showed, I think, the front of the building. Now the other side, yeah. Now that looks like that's a pretty steep slope there.
Yeah.
So they couldn't move, they'd have trouble building on that unless they, wouldn't they?
This part here, if they were to move it to the south, that's where, this is where there's the slope. This is the east property line here. But in this direction, it's graded and it's flat.
That's what I'm saying, just move it away.
So yeah, if
move it north
you could actually move it further that way.
Which way? Which way?
To the west, in the west direction. So if here's the corner of the property here, or the structure, you could move it that way, because this area is graded and flat.
And that would give them 30 feet?
It might not give him 30 feet, but it would give him a little bit more room from the east property line. Part of the issue that the zoning administrator had was that 1 foot from the property line is not the minimum departure from code regulations. So he may have had better grounds if he were to move it basically as far away from that property line as possible. And there is more room over here. So the question was really, why wasn't it built further away from the property line?
Yeah, but we're looking at special circumstances here, right?
Yeah. But the finding from the zoning administrator was that there aren't special circumstances that would justify not having the building further over here. And because there's another area on the property that's buildable on the northwest corner of the property where he could have constructed it instead of 1 foot from the property line.
So the building administrator's opinion would be that even moving the shed onto this flatter area would not represent special circumstances. Am I hearing that right?
No, it's basically, that would have been an option. So there isn't a necessity to put it 1 foot from the property line, because it could have been, say, moved over here, and let's say it was 8 feet from the property line.
And so the zoning administrator then would,
He might not approve it, but it would have been better, it would be better grounds, because it wouldn't be as close to, I mean, 1 foot is just not the minimum departure from what's required, which is 30 feet. So at least if it were 8 feet further to the west, I mean, that would be more likely to be approved, basically. I mean, it would be up to the zoning administrator, but it certainly would be a better, a better situation than what it is right now.
but we're looking at the barn as being in violation too, right? Which is 8 feet from the property line?
That's right.
And so
It-
it seems like either 30 feet is 30 feet or is 8 feet okay? Is that the question?
It's based on what the zoning administrator decided.
Well, I
and
mean,
what he
for
decided.
us, I mean,
Maybe I can jump in here and clarify a little. Remember, what you have right now in front of you is an appeal of a denial of the zoning administrator of a variance request for, I believe, 3 different, 2 structures and 1 enclosure. What the commission needs to look at and consider in this matter is, based on what the appellant provides, is there, in fact, special circumstances to justify overturning the zoning administrator's decision? Now, within that, your consideration, you should be looking at the evidence in front of the zoning administrator, the rationale for the zoning administrator's decision. As Melanie has pointed out, one of the issues, and this commission has heard some controversial variances, the first prong of a finding for a variance is, are there special circumstances, topographical, dealing with the property? And I would venture to state that what the zoning administrator and what Melanie has presented right now is contradictory to that, if in fact there are other buildable areas on the property. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't other special circumstances that the appellate can provide you, which would persuade this planning commission that this variance could be granted. But what your charge is not to do is to decide, yeah, it could be moved over here, and maybe if he moves it 2 feet or 3 feet, then it's okay. That's not in front of this commission right now. What's in front of the commission is a request for a variance, an appeal of denial, but a request for a variance to allow the structures which were illegally constructed without a building permit and code enforcement to remain in their current positions. So that's what you need to focus on, is, are there special circumstances for the current locations? Is it a minimum departure from the zoning code? Would it be a grant of special circumstances? And when the time comes, we can walk through each one of the findings if that's where the commission decides it's going to go. But I just wanted to focus you on what you're looking at in terms of this appeal.
Okay.
thank you.
Okay, thank you, Karen. I know for me, just sort of asking the questions, I know it sort of sounds like we're trying to place, in my mind, if it could have been moved back, say 25 feet, and it was, then maybe even though there's a location on another portion of the property, it just gives me a feeling for where it is and what's going on.
And I definitely think that's, don't misunderstand me, I think that is a valid exercise of the commission, because it does go to the deliberation on special circumstances. Could it have been moved? We don't know if it would have been approved, and that's really irrelevant at this point in time.
It's just
But
work.
that question is very relevant.
Yeah. Okay. Any other?
Melanie, did you say that shed had electricity in it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if that's it, if the appellant would like to get up and...
Thank you. I'm sorry. Daryl Rogers, I'm the owner of this project. I have a PowerPoint that I provided yesterday. I don't know how they want me to go about it, but while they're setting it up.
I think this gentleman right here will
Alrighty.
be able to assist you.
As he's doing that, I'm prepared to answer everything that was in the report, but I would like to address something that just came up first time, and it's not going to be in the presentation because it to me is a big deal, although it doesn't affect what the county council was saying you're supposed to review. The statement was just made for the first time after 2 different hearings and now this appeal that I was told to stop building and kept going. That is the first time I have ever heard that complaint. I am more than willing to show Google Earth map images and to show the complaint date and a Google Earth map that would show the building there. At no time did I continue to build after being told not to. When they came out was well after this structure was built. And so I want to be very clear with that.
You know, I guess I'd like to ask a question on that because, you know, whether you were told to stop building or not, when you were building, when you were actually under construction, were you made aware that you were close, you know, within the variance area, or within the setback area? Were you made aware of that?
No, and I'll show actually how, and I can prove that.
So when did you become aware that you were building your structure within an area that was a setback?
First, I was made aware that it needed a permit. I wasn't even aware it needed a permit. So when they said you need a permit, I went right down and I filed for the permit. And at that time, they came out and they said, well, we can't do this permit unless we give you a variance because you're within the setbacks.
And you were still under construction at that time?
No, this place was built.
It was completed?
Yes. The only thing that wasn't completed, is because I know it's been mentioned, was electrical. I never supplied this building with electrical. When I was told to go get a permit, because I didn't know I was going to have to do it, I went to the county counter here, went through the process, and I had to provide as-built letters from the people that built to say that it was done to code. And the person at the front said, where's your electrical? And I said, it doesn't have electrical. And he said, well, why would you apply for a permit if it doesn't have electrical? And I said, I'm not sure what you mean. I didn't even know I was going to need a permit. I'm just following the instructions I've been told now. And he said, well, if you're going to get a permit, you might as well put electrical in. So I had 4 lights put in there. And that you saw there's like an air conditioning unit in the back. I had those installed as I was applying for the permit when the person at the front desk said, you might as well get electrical. This building was never meant to have electrical. It didn't when it was completed. And it actually mirrors what I'm about to show you. This structure.
But at that time, you did know that you had built the structure within the setback?
At that point, yes, I did.
Okay, so you were still sort of under construction. You were still doing things.
Well, I had them put lights on it, yeah.
Okay.
Just as a basis of understanding, we were told that you're in the real estate business.
Correct.
And that's correct. So you're not aware that there are setbacks on properties and that you need permits for certain structures?
For certain, we are, but if you actually read the California Residential Purchase Agreement, there's an entire paragraph that states very clearly it has nothing to do with our testing for real estate license. We are not asked to know permits. We're not asked to know setbacks. We have no knowledge. And in fact, what I can show is that my house that was approved and built all final to code in 2005 is only 7 feet from the line. And I did not need a variance for my house. So for my knowledge, no, I had no knowledge. I mean, if they hadn't told me on my house that I needed a variance and it went through and it is not 30 feet and anyone is more than willing to come out and look at it. So I found a lot of inconsistencies as to what needs a variance and, as you mentioned, Mr. Johnson, what needs a permit. And so I'm learning a lot through this process. I now know a lot more than I did.
I guess you've been in real estate for a while, it appears, and I'm sure you've sold properties that maybe had inconsistencies and stuff, and so, in the disclosures and everything that, this property might not conform to current building code standards and all this, and after that, I guess my question is, you, I would think, would be astute enough after selling a lot of properties and stuff, when it came to your own properties, understand very well the due diligence of looking at, be it setbacks, even if you didn't know what setbacks were and stuff, that everything dealing with the property that you purchased, that you were going to construct on, that you would do everything in your power to make sure that everything was in conformance, and if something you couldn't conform to, that you would, start the process ahead of building. And I guess
I understand where you're coming from. But I'm going to show if I had a reason to believe there was a problem. Like I said, I have a house that's 7-8 feet and never brought up an issue. I found out since in talking to Ms. Jackson that apparently many years ago they were 15 feet and they got moved to 30 feet. I'd also like to show you this structure right here. I bought my house in 1997. I lived in Newcastle for going on 18 years. When I bought my house, that they're calling a shed, I called it an ag building. The reason I called it an ag building, that was there. There were no permits for that. Okay?
Is that the one on the property line?
No, this is years ago.
Okay.
Okay, because basically this is a story of what I did and
Okay.
what my intent was.
Tore that one down.
If you look, there's a door, there's a window, and there's a one-car garage. Very similar. This is actually about 150 square feet larger than the current shed that I built. Okay? I went and built a second unit for my mom. I got all my permits, I went down, and we determined that the best place, based on setbacks for a second dwelling, okay, was going to be where this shed was. So I had to demolish this shed and build the second, my in-laws' quarters right there.
Excuse me, when was that? What year was that you built residence?
I don't want to say and be off. I believe we built my mom's house, I want to say like 2011-ish, 2010, right in there. I could go find it out and give you exact.
Yeah, but we have some here that says,
But Darrell, this one was a permitted,
No.
I mean, when you built it for your mom?
Oh, but this isn't my mom's. Yes, I built my mom's dwelling all according to the rules.
Oh, okay. But you tore this down and didn't think about
But that part brings it. So we found out this is the place we're going to build my mom's house, where this ag building was. I went to the counter, I said, do I need a demo permit? Because we found this is the spot. I got all my plans approved to build the second dwelling. The person at the front is the person who gave me that name, ag dwelling. The shed moniker has come from the county. They said, does it have electrical? This building did not. And I said, no. They looked in the records. They said, we don't even have a permit for it. I don't know that you need a demo permit. And I said, I want to make sure. They said, just demo it, build your mom's. So I did that. My whole point to that is that I needed to replace this building. It's used for, my wife runs the Placer County 4-H Horse Division and the Del Oro High School equestrian team. Okay? And we let girls store their horses and tack for those of them who don't have homes that have that ability. Only 2. We have 2 stalls. So we replaced this, and I moved it up the hill. I make that point because I'll show you in Google Earth images that this thought of I was doing it with wanton disregard. As inspectors were coming and inspecting the second dwelling, I used the same framers and roofers because it was cheaper. So they were rebuilding this unit up top at the same time they were building my mom's house. So the inspector, even on one occasion, the framer was actually at the shed, and the inspector had to go inside the shed and get him to come down and sign off. At no time did he say, hey, stop this, what are you doing? I was not building with wanton disregard. I was replacing an unpermitted ag building with another unpermitted ag building. Okay, so that's very clear. The barn of what they're calling the barn now, which I'll show you pictures of, is 2 stalls, corrugated metal, the kits. It's not permanently affixed. It's the type, you can grade out, you pound stakes to put it in, but it's a metal kit barn, and it has a hay room on the end. That replaced old stalls, but the horses and the stalls, what they're calling the barn now, was there long before this whole thing took place. It was there before one of my neighbors, Mr. Caton, had moved in. I had the horses. And so that came in later. Why all of a sudden the barn became an issue, I'm still at a loss. You asked for overheads. It's kind of hard to see in this one. I don't know where that. I go like this. So you can kind of see the shadow right there of the original stalls, okay? I also want to show that, and I'll show you another too. That's a pretty large barn you'll see in comparison to the size of mine. That is my neighbor's barn, or whatever you want to call it, shed. It's not permitted. It's on a permanent foundation. It not only has electrical, it has plumbing. And it's never been permitted, but it doesn't look like a living structure to me. Another reason why I didn't think something 1/4 the size of this would need a permit as well. This is a more up-to-date photo, okay? The neighbor on this side, who cannot see my structure and will come up here today and say whatever things, I don't think they're relevant to the point, she has 1, 2 other structures, which they would call barn. This houses, I believe, 10 to 15 goats. This is a 2-stall horse thing, just like mine, although hers is made out of wood, not metal. Neither of those permitted. So I've got them on both sides. This is where mine is, the structure, okay? To look at what you had mentioned, could it have been moved this way? Right here is the well house. There's my main house. That's where the water lines go. I did not want to pour a foundation over the top of the water lines. That's the reason why it didn't come out this way, okay? But it has never been mentioned to go there. Mr. Rosasco has never said that. He has denied the variance based on the fact that he said there are not special privileges because you have an alternate building space right over there. Okay, that is the only place he is located and said, yes, you could build there, and I'm disagreeing with that. The staff, who's the only group who's actually been to the property, not everybody over there, but people who've physically been there and walked it with me, they approved this. They did see special circumstances. They did not see another area that we could do this without a variance.
Let me see, on that other area, I did drive to the end of the road and look up.
Okay.
And it looks like it's been graded. And so, anyway, I guess my question is, what in your opinion makes that not suitable?
I actually put a video together to show you, but again, and I'll answer the question quickly, it would also require a variance. In addition to requiring a variance, it would require the cutting down of 3 oak trees, all more than 5 feet in diameter, large oak trees, which I'm not for doing. I don't know if it's part of the rule that if I could build something in a place where I don't have to cut down oak trees, I think it's better. And then I don't know if this plays into your opinion, and I'm not trying to create arguments. My neighbor on that side is here today, has filed over 400 animal control complaints against me and not one. She has filed, every time I do a burn pile, she calls environmental health for the smoke. To be honest, I didn't want to build one over on that side.
Well, this area is already graded, it looks like. Somebody has
Just as the other area was, but it would require a variance as well and the cutting down of oak trees.
If it's graded, it would require the cutting down.
Yeah, you'll have to see the oak trees come off the hill, and they're like that, and you'll actually see them in the video. So the other issues, the staff recommended this. All issues that were raised by Mr. Zasco are based on no visits to the property, and a very important statement. They're in every one of his answers on his staff report to you, which is there is an alternate building site that would not require a variance. If that can be proven, I will move it. I have no problem with that, okay? I know that can't happen, and that's my main issue. I don't want to get denied based on another place I could build it and then have to pay $700 for a variance for a place that Mr. Zasco said I wouldn't need one. And I already know, now that I've measured it, that I would need one in that location. And then the special privileges. There's also a new thing that was brought up. It was never brought up before. The staff recommended, they said there is no detrimental value as far as environmental, fire, safety, views, or anything like that. Then all of a sudden that was brought up for the first time, that there was now. And I would like to address that as well. This shows you my actual parcel map. This is from the county. They gave me a topo map, okay? It's kind of hard because, as you know, they're not accurate. That red line should actually be over about 1 centimeter because you can see my neighbor's modular or manufactured homes look like they're on my property. They're not.
Where's the road coming into your property?
It's right. It's kind of hard to see, but it comes right
It comes
down
through there because I came right up to the end of that driveway this morning.
Okay.
After I found your street, wandering up and down.
Up and down Taylor.
I finally found the one to go in there. I just wanted to make sure that I was oriented myself right.
Yeah.
Your house is the one on the right, correct?
This is my house.
And the other house,
That's my mom's in-laws quarters,
is
fully
that the one that
permitted.
you said is too close to property line too?
No, this is totally within all
Okay,
requirements, everything finaled and everything.
okay.
Well, isn't that horse, what do you call it, training area, isn't that on your property?
No, it's not. It's been mentioned by one of my neighbors that it is, and it is not.
It's not.
I built it. The previous person who lived there, she had horses. Unfortunately, her husband came down with terminal cancer. We made a deal. I said, I will do all the materials and build on your spot, the arena. We'd like to use it. You can use it. And that was the deal she made. It's now a totally new neighbor who I'm also friends with. I actually did represent him, and I let him know where the property line is, that there was a discrepancy with the property line, but that it was actually his, and I had built it, and we just use it. And we're good friends. He doesn't care. But that neighbor keeps saying that this is where I could build. This line should be over right about there. As you kind of see, this whole thing should be shifted about a centimeter to make it exactly accurate where our lines are. I got this topo map from the county. You can see this, it's hard to see. That says 720, 700, 680, 660. Basically showing you that there's a 100-foot drop from there to there. This whole property goes downhill as a slope, okay? There are some graded areas, but for the most part, this area up here, which I'll show you, which is the area Mr. Rosasco has designated as the alternate building site, which could possibly be the only other place, still would require a variance and still would require me to put something not only within 5 feet of a property line, but this gentleman at the top, he hasn't shown up here, he has no problems with this, but he has an easement. If you come up, there's an easement road that goes to his property. And so I would have to also not only be set back from the property line, I have to make sure I'm off of his easement and not cover his access to his gate up there as well.
So there's not a current road there?
What's that?
There's not a current road there?
It's like a dirt road, and there is a gate. It's like a country road. It's not like
That's on
paved.
your property?
Yes, it actually runs right up the side of my mom's house here. And anyone can come out and see that. The alternate building site, again, is right up in this area. I don't know how to do this on. This is actually a video to show it. Do you know where the tech guy is to start the video? Okay. Again, I've asked Mr. Rosasco to come out to the site. What I show in the video as I walk, you can see the slope behind my mom's house. Then there is a graded area, okay? And in the next thing, I laid out a tape from the edge of the rock outcrop, and you can see how the edge of the hill comes down, and I ran that tape across, and I actually held up the tape measure so you could see the distance, okay? And that padded area, the widest portion, and you can see the tree limbs coming down, okay, because they actually come out over that space. That widest area is about 38 feet across. The setbacks are 30. So again, if I did build the same building there, I could come in 3 to 4 feet on one side. I believe I'd have to come in even farther, because if you actually look where the ledge is on the other side, they don't let you build right on the ledge. They're going to make you move it into where it's more sound. So I'm going to be asking for a 3-foot variance at the very least on this portion. And I'd have to cut down those trees. I'm sorry, I can't show you the trees right now. There is a video that shows them. I have been willing, I've said, Mr. Rosasco, come out, because what I'd ask, if he will stake this area and say, move it here, I don't want to. It costs a lot of money to dismantle something and rebuild it. But if that's where it comes down to, if that's the rule, that's fine. But I know I can't put it there without a variance. And that is black and white. It's a special privilege then. There is not a spot on my property that he could say, build here without a variance. It just would not work. If you look at the special privileges provision, it says I have to be able to enjoy my property the same way everybody else does around me with similar zoning. That's what the law states. And it states, as long as I have special privileges, topography, leach fields, creeks, ponds, that prohibit me from enjoying those same privileges that my neighbors do, then I should be granted a variance. I think it's important to note this set of buildings that my neighbor has right on the property line were all granted variances by Mr. Rosasco to be within the setback. He has 10 acres. Look at all this space. That does upset me, that he can look at my little space and say, you could have built it right here on this little 35 to 40-foot spot, but he couldn't have put his modular homes anywhere here. He determined that, yes, he should be getting a variance, and he should be able to build those, but not on mine. Again, over here, the 2 barns, not requiring permits, mine is. You brought the point up, what does require a permit? To be honest, Mr. Johnson, I've asked. They've gone through this not permanently affixed, sort of this size. I honestly still do not know, as a real estate agent as well. I couldn't tell you. I know living dwellings that have electrical or plumbing need them. Outside of that, if you look at, you'll look at the pictures, okay? It's very similar. It's actually smaller in width than the previous ag building that was on my property without permits and without electrical. If they want me to take out electrical, I'll take it out. He's saying this could be a detrimental value to the fire safety or the views of the area. He's saying that's not a detrimental value. That's right on the property line as well. That's my neighbor's red barn that has no permits and has a bathroom in it. Okay, that is right behind my structure. This is the 2-stall with a hay room on the end, what they're calling barn, that was there long before any of this came up. It's only now been thrown into the picture because when they came out to do the shed part, they also saw this and said, well, that's also in a bad place. It's not a permanent structure. I would like it to be. It's a hassle to move them. But each one of those pillars, you drive stakes into the ground, and then you anchor them like that. They're panels that you buy, and then you attach with those metal couplings. So, yes, I could take this, but if he allows me and says you can move the shed to that other location, there is 0 locations for that then, because you're talking about 2 different, and this one's 8 feet from there. There is a detrimental value that was brought up at the last hearing. It's the first time it was brought up. It was never called to me by my neighbor until the hearing, and that was, he said, I have a huge problem with the flies. That was the first time I heard that. Since that day, and if you ask him, he'll have to admit to it, whether he likes this or not, I removed both horses. I told the 4-H girls we could not have the horses there over this time period. I've hired an independent consultant from a company called Fly Predators. He's coming in. He is attaching different units that will make sure that's not an issue. I do not believe that he should have to deal with flies from horses. I do not want to cause problems for the neighbors at all. That is not fair, and the minute I found out about it, I addressed it. There are no horses currently there, and until I get the fly issue taken care of, I will not put them back in there. And that's the only thing that's been brought up as a detrimental value.
The shade in the picture, is that the shed? The shade in the picture?
The shade, yes, it is. This, again, it's hard to see, but all of this crowded tree area is a modular home right on the property line that was approved by Mr. Rosasco for my neighbor. So he's saying that's not an environmental detriment, but my building is. I just don't feel like I'm being graded on the same terms that they are. You know, at the end of the day, I just show this picture. A lot of the girls wanted to come here, but they're obviously in school. This is the first year of the Del Oro equestrian team. They have 33 girls. Many of them can't afford to board a horse somewhere. We don't board them long term. We give them times and opportunities to do that. The inside of the shed, if anybody comes look, is painted. All the girls painted it. It was painted with a chalkboard paint so that they can do lessons in there. They have farriers come out. They have the Lumen Space and Vet Clinic, and they're able to have a good experience. I don't want to cause problems for anybody. If I am asked by the commission to deny this and move it, okay, I'll abide by that, but I would at least like, with that, the location I need to move it to, because I don't believe exists a part on my property that it can be built without a variance, and I am more than willing to walk the property with any member of the staff for them to show me where that place is. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning, members of the commission. I'm Robert Gonzalez. I represent Robert and Marilyn Caton, who own the adjacent parcel to Mr. Rogers. You know, having sat through this, I've been involved in this for quite a while as well, and have sent correspondence to to the Planning Commission when my client notified me there was an issue with respect to a neighbor building some structures that encroached on his property lines. You know, I appreciate Mr. Rogers' concern about this, but this situation or this matter is more of one about begging for forgiveness and asking for permission. I really find it hard to believe. I'm baffled and perplexed by Mr. Rogers' statement that he was unaware of needing a variance. You know, he's a seasoned real estate agent or realtor. I believe he's worked for Keller Williams for a long time. I don't know if he still does. But as we all know, and county council can appreciate this, you know, ignorance of the law is no excuse. He did state to the council or the commission a moment ago that I know I can't build there without a variance with respect to the other side of the property where his in-laws' quarters are. If he knew that or knows that, why wouldn't he know that he needed a variance where he's going to be building a structure roughly 12 inches from the property line of the neighbor? So we take some concern and issue with that. You know, the bottom line here is that in order for a variance to be issued, there have to be special circumstances. This has been elucidated very clearly by county council. You know, the first test is, are there special circumstances based on topography? It seems pretty clear that the answer is no. There are other places for him to build. He's not being graded or treated differently than anybody else. My neighbors would not, if they were in similar circumstances, build a structure within 1 foot from the property line, especially if you're going to have horses there, you know, without doing the proper due diligence, resourceful diligence, looking into it, especially as a realtor. I mean, to me, that's simply inexcusable. It's as though you're circumventing the system, hoping to get away with it, and then dealing with the consequences later, which is why I feel we're here. The second issue is, you know, is this a departure from zoning codes? Yes, it's not a minimum departure in any way. It encroaches on my client's setback. There's a 30-foot utility easement as well. I believe PG&E lines run through there, and that raises a significant issue. I can't help but feel that Mr. Rogers is indifferent to the zoning laws of this county. You know, he'd previously built his pool, and if I'm not mistaken, obtained a variance for that. And I believe he built the pool first and then requested a variance subsequent to that. So I think we're essentially looking at a situation where there's a pattern of this type of behavior. And I think it's quite certain from his own statements that he's well aware as a realtor of what he could and could not do and what he should and should not do. And it seems to be more a matter of, you know, whether he knew or not, he should have known. And the fly issue, you know, my clients are appreciative of Mr. Rogers' recent phone call on this Sunday to address the issue of the flies, but, you know, that doesn't remedy the issue they've had for the last 2.5 years. My client did indeed notify his family if they could do something about the fly issue. It's really very close to their patio. They can't enjoy, the use and enjoyment of their property essentially has been impeded by this, and they've asked him to take care of it. It essentially just went ignored, and they can't have, you know, eating outside or having breakfast outside, which is something they used to do. They can't. You've got, you know, horse excrement or manure that's attracting flies. I don't know how well fly abatement can actually be instituted or implemented in this area and whether that would even be effective. But, you know, our request would be that the current denial of the variance be upheld. There's no reason for these structures to be allowed to remain in their current state. They should never have been built to begin with. And if there is, in my opinion, whether there is or not another suitable location for them, the bottom line is that they shouldn't be there anyway. If there is a place for them to be moved to, then that's fine. But we would request that the variance be denied, and, you know, irrespective of whether or not there's a suitable alternative on Mr. Rogers' property for their placement.
Let me say I have a question. You mentioned the fly issue being a 2.5-year issue.
Correct.
Was that when your clients moved in, or have they lived there longer?
We've been here for 5 years. This is my 5th year.
And so is that implying that the barn wasn't there before 2.5 years ago?
The barn was
That was when that was built?
About 2 years ago, yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
I just want to make sure that I'm on the right track here with what council told us. We're basically trying to decide whether the zoning administrator was correct in his assertion that there was another place to build and whether we're going to uphold that or not. And, well, it's real easy. In fact, I found myself scribbling notes as Mr. Rogers was talking, and that to get into the did he know or should he have known or what he knew really doesn't make any difference. It's a tangent we can get on that will eat up a lot of time and doesn't really keep us on track as to what we're trying to accomplish. And I just would hope we can maybe just kind of keep focused on
this
on the task at hand, and it would be, like I say, it's very easy to get into the what should have been known and what kind of knowledge was or wasn't there, but it really at this point doesn't make any difference from what I understand we're tasked with dealing with.
Mr. Chair, could I ask that we have Melanie come back up and talk to Mr. Rogers, stating that there is not a buildable area without a variance?
He's still standing there.
Pardon?
Well, he's still standing there.
Well, he needs to sit down and.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Does it make any difference at all if there's another place to move this shed? Is it relevant at all?
Yeah.
And if so, why?
Yes, Melanie.
Yes, it is relevant.
To,
It's relevant to whether or not there's special circumstances on the property.
well, if there's special if the property is as it lays right now, and it was determined that there's not enough room to build the shed, then the shed should have been built in the first place anyway. So I'm not sure why moving it has any difference. I think I'm concurring with what Jeffrey's talking about, is we're talking about something that makes no difference to this decision. Is that correct? Jeff, is that or Mike?
I mean, as far as when he knew or what he knew, or whether it's 8 feet or
3
5 feet or 6 inches,
Right.
we're deciding, did the zoning administrator act properly in denying this application?
Correct.
Are we discussing now, or are we still having some testimony coming?
We're having testimony come up, but he's just.
Okay.
Okay, okay. Hey, Melanie, go ahead.
Yeah, what would you like me to address?
Well, it was more, I guess, the relocation for the barn and the shed.
Does he have an alternative
Is
to grant
that-
him the special circumstances?
Yes, let me,
And he's saying no, he's taking issue with you.
that's right. And I'd like to point to the maps that were given to you prior to this hearing. We have 2 site plans that were turned in by Mr. Rogers, both of which circle that same area, and one says pad, the other says ag building. And that is the same area that the zoning administrator was pointing out as a buildable area. So what we had turned in is consistent with what the zoning administrator found.
Did you walk this property, Melanie?
I did.
Or the trees in that padded area where he's saying move it to that location, are there trees and stuff where it would affect setbacks from adjoining properties?
I don't think so. I can't tell exactly where the property line is, but I can tell you that there's buildable area there that's unlikely to need a variance.
It's a pretty large pad, isn't it, that's been graded at some point in time for some purpose?
That's right. I think I've run out of batteries.
Ken?
I don't know what, I mean, seriously, there's no batteries.
I have a question when I,
Okay.
my turn.
Oh,
Yeah. I see.
okay, at this time Larry has a question, go ahead.
Well, I guess while we have the 2 staff people up there, EJ too, one thing that's a little bit bothersome to me is that so often in variance applications, we tend to look at if the person is being denied the use of their property that other people have been able to do. And it's obvious here that the neighbors here have also got some egg on their face
so to speak. I guess what I'm trying to get at is you would have to make the finding in order to approve this almost, at least in my mind, that he is being denied the use of his property that his neighbors are enjoying. Is that a fair comment?
Yes.
Why?
Well, that isn't what it says here. I mean,
But it's a fact.
Let me break this down for you again, and you may want to defer this to hear any more public testimony first. And I might suggest that, because then I think what we could do is step back and go through what the evidentiary requirements are for one, to grant or deny the appeal. And then you get to your second issue of if you're denying the appeal, you're upholding the zoning. In other words, there are several procedural steps, and I think it merits going through that on the record.
You want to do that first or finish testimony?
Yeah, if you want to finish testimony first.
Yeah, because I know
It's your choice.
There are one or two other people that want to speak.
Thank you, Ken. You get ignored down here in the end.
Do you want to wait till we get into the discussion of staff on the alternate location? That'll tie it up and we'll just get past. Melanie, we'll let the people in the public speak now, and then
Got it.
that way when we get into the next stage here. Okay, go ahead. It's your turn. Please state your name.
I'm Jeannie Fritz. I'm the one with the 2 barns and the 400 whatever he said about animal control and whatever. I doubt there's that many, but and it's all because his dogs have been off the property or they've been building against my property line or various things. The first question I would have is, has anybody confirmed that the so-called surveyor is legitimate? Because I have big red flags going up at my end. I have called on this company. He said he's a subcontractor to a company, Guile Engineering, who is in Wisconsin. I have no idea what that has to do with California.
Ken Guile?
I have called someone at the contractors board, and he said he's going to call the state and get back to me. He hasn't yet. But he said it would put up red flags for me, too. So they were ordered to get a survey done to confirm property lines. I don't think that's been happening yet. And that's what all this is about. So to me, that's your first step. Maybe an independent contractor, I don't know. But the one that he uses, I don't think this will hold up.
Okay, well, right.
Because if the property lines from that survey is what you guys are going by, I think that's an issue.
Yeah, that's a different.
And he had his propane tank for his mother put 6 inches from my fence line. I didn't call Darrell. I called the propane company. I said, you realize that that's illegal. They moved it, well, I don't know, within 24, 48 hours. I didn't have to call Darrell, whether he knew it or not. Nobody puts propane tanks up against a fence line.
Oh, okay, well, our
I understand. We're still talking property lines,
don't
though.
need-
That's what I'm saying. So, whatever you're going to, everything's hinged on the property lines, as I see it. Plus the fact that he's done this a number of times without regard for any of our laws. So that's really my position.
Okay, go ahead. You can.
Well, I bought this property 5 years ago. My name is Bob
Your
Caton.
name for the record, please.
Pardon me?
Your name for the
Oh,
record.
my name is Bob Caton, Robert Caton. I'm the owner of the property next to Rogers. I bought this property 5 years ago. As far as I know, and as far as the paperwork that I've gotten through the county, everything that I have shows that all of my buildings are legal and permitted. My setbacks, there was a variance that was applied for and accepted for the modular that I'm in. It's true it doesn't have a 30-foot setback. It's got an 18-foot setback. But like I say, the variance was asked for and given. So I just wanted to clear the air with that.
How much setback did you say those buildings are?
My setback on my house here, this,
No, you said it. What did you say?
18 feet, I think.
So
I'm
all
pretty
your
sure.
buildings are 18 feet or greater?
Yeah, as far as I know, yes. I haven't measured my shop, but I mean, the shop was built previous to my house. I do know that. That was speaking to the previous property owner, the property owner that I bought it from. Any other history other than that, I'm really not sure what's what on that property. So, but you know, if I'm in violation of anything, I would sure straighten it up, clear it up. But as far as I know, I'm legal all the way with everything. So, as I just wanted to add that. So.
Let me see, just maybe, I think it's your complaint about the horses?
Yes. Well, I was complaining about the whole setup. You know, Mr. Rogers states that he didn't know that he was in violation of that setback. Well, he may not have, but the day he was pouring concrete, I was expecting some gravel for my road. I heard a truck down, I thought it was the lower part of the property, and I went down to check it out, and it was a concrete truck that was backing up to the fence on his side. And forms were set up, and they were getting ready to pour. And I went out and I said, whoa, 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 you know, you guys are inside the setback. There's a setback law that you have to follow. I didn't speak to Mr. Rogers, but it was his crew that was doing the work. And so they stopped. They held off for a little while. And later that day, I spoke to, I can't remember, I think it was one of the members of the crew, that they had went ahead and poured the slab. And I was told that Mr. Rogers was going to take care of it later. So
He was going to what?
Mr. Rogers said that he was going to take care of it later. My concern is, one of my concerns is, my property is 10 acres, and I can split it into 4 parcels. I bought that property to leave my kids something, and I can split that property, like I said, into 4 parcels and give each one of my kids. And I really don't want to really have anything to devaluate the value of that property if I could prevent it. And I sure would hope that my neighbors would see it the same way, because I would not try to devalue their property in any way. So.
Do you have horses?
No. Okay. No, I have no horse. I don't have any livestock at all. Any questions?
Nope.
Okay, thank you.
I have one question. I just need to ask it and put it on the record. May I? Just a question.
Just a quick question, and then you should never allow this.
I am Jeannie Fritz again, and my question is, can any homeowner, if they know someone or not, encroach on their property and not have it recorded with the county as they're using it?
I don't know.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah,
If the people that are currently there now, something happens as life does, and they have to move and sell the place, then what? He's already using some of the property, as he was before these people moved in. Then what?
Some of what property?
Some of the property from the arena that he said he's friends with this guy, so he's using it. They have no problem with it.
If your question is if a neighbor allows somebody to use their property, they can use it, and then when it sells, it's up to the new owner to decide if they.
Right.
Yeah.
And unless they know that it's not their property.
Well.
I can give a brief answer to that. There's always 2 layers involving setbacks and encroachments. One is the zoning code requirements for setbacks. The other is in the private property rights arena as to whether property lines are being encroached on and whether there are easements for that, or whether those parties elect to exercise their rights in court to either perfect or prevent that sort of encroachment, but that's not an issue that the county gets involved in.
Oh, okay, I'll give you just a minute to rebuttal.
Mr. Chair, you might want to just double check that there's no other members of the public that want to speak before you hear the rebuttal from the appellant.
Okay, is there anybody else? Seeing none.
I don't want to be long. I agree with Mr. Moss was asking what all these other things we can argue all day, and I can prove that I never built a pool, and we can go on and on. It wouldn't matter. I think it goes back to Mr. Gray. Your comment was, does it matter if there's an alternate building place? What I've been told and what I read in the report is it absolutely does matter, because you made the comment, well, then it doesn't get built. My understanding, and I may be incorrect, but in reading the rules, and the staff can answer this, is that if the size, space, topography, ponds, creeks of my property prohibit me from building something that my neighboring properties can build, then I should be allowed to build that with a variance. That's where I have to apply for it. But if there is another location on the property that I could do it without a variance, I need to build it there. I cannot go get a variance somewhere else. So the sole issue in front of you is there another place on the property that I could build it without a variance? Ms. Jackson has stated there is. I disagree with that. We can go back and forth, but my only issue then, if you go on her admission that it's buildable, or Mr. Rosasco's that you could build it there, then I just ask that be in the record, and that I not have to pay $700 for a variance, because I know under oath that that location will need a variance. So I just want to get out of all the red tape. If that's the reason it gets denied, fine, let me move it to that other location. Don't make me jump through that hoop and pay more money when she just stated it wouldn't require a variance. So that's it.
Thank you. Okay. We'll close it off to the public and come back for discussion with staff.
I wonder if I could just try and summarize the law and the principles behind what's in front of the commission, for the commission. What I want to do is I want to actually back up. As is in the staff report, this is a code enforcement matter. And this commission has seen code enforcement matters come up before, where one of the potential resolutions of that code violation is an application for a variance for the setbacks. There is never a guarantee that that variance will be granted. It's an option open to the owner. The other options are move the building or take the building down and not replace it. So that's where we started from here. Now, that request went to the zoning administrator. A variance is what's referred to as a quasi-judicial matter, which means the zoning administrator has to base his decision, as you must, based on the evidence presented in the record. And that evidence must be able to support the findings, and there are 4 of them, to grant a variance. Under the law, the special circumstances is viewed very, very strictly. It is essentially irrelevant what the neighbor has. The duty of the zoning administrator was to look at this particular property, to weigh the evidence in front of him, and that provided by the testimony of those who were present at the hearing, to determine whether he could affirmatively make that finding of a special circumstance. The record establishes that he concluded he could not. One of those factors was he viewed another site. That is relevant, and something for this commission also to consider. Now, to the issue of special privileges and enjoying the privileges that others have in this particular zone, I point out that most cases look at this in the sense that, do you end up with an unbuildable lot, for example, if you can't grant a variance so that somebody who owns a res ag parcel can build a house on it because there's too much slope, water features, et cetera, special topography that limits the parcel to a very specific physical area. That's a classic example of where I would envision, if something of that sort came to the commission, there might be evidence to say, yes, this individual deserves the same right as his neighbor, his or her neighbor, to have a house there. Now, to the issue of accessory structures, that's not necessarily the same principle. The fact that you may want to build 4, 5, 3, 2, 1 structures on a property and may be allowed under the zoning to do so doesn't necessarily mean that that is your right to do so and your right to have a variance because you can't quite fit in every one of the structures you want on your property. Last, I would say that under the law, there are two other principles that arise with variances. One, ignorance of the law is not a defense. And two, the creation of your own hardship is not a reason to grant a variance. Now, we're here with an appeal of the zoning administrator's denial of the variance. The first item that this commission must deliberate on is whether or not to grant Mr. Rogers' appeal. I would suggest that you take that item first, and in doing so, what you are reviewing is whether or not the zoning administrator abused his discretion in denying the variance. An abuse of discretion means he didn't have evidence to deny it. And that is the principle you're starting with in your deliberation. So whether he knew or not as a real estate agent, you need to look at the evidence. Whether or not other properties might be have zoning code violations, that could be. But what's germane to your consideration is, was there evidence to support the zoning administrator's denial of this variance? If you believe there was not that evidence, then staff would appreciate that that is stated on the record before you take your vote. And I'd like to walk through the next step, because if, for example, you decide that the zoning administrator abused his discretion and the majority of this commission would like to grant the variance, I would suggest we step through each one of these, because we do have 3 structures. This can be separated out. But you will need to articulate on the record findings if you choose to uphold the variance. And then we'll get into all the various procedures of how we're going to get there. But I'm moving ahead of myself. What I'm going to suggest you do is now deliberate strictly on the issue of the appeal. Is there a reason to grant this appeal or not? Articulate what evidence you find would support whichever way the commission wishes to move.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Larry?
Dealing with the appeal, and that's fine. I'm what I want to speak to at this point, if I could. We've heard testimony from the owner, and we've heard testimony from staff that are contradictory.
Right.
And I think that's an issue. I'm not sure exactly how to approach it, other than maybe we need to have a surveyor go out, or a licensed engineer, or someone to come back and present to us, yes, there is proper locations for these other buildings to be moved to, or no, there isn't, and that takes care of the appeal issue in my own mind. Now, you're going to tell me something different, probably.
Yeah, and I think ESD may confirm, but I believe a survey was done as far as the property line. Is that correct?
Only the east property line. That was the only line that was surveyed, and under the direction of Ken Guile, who is a known surveyor, and also with direct communication with the county surveyor. So as far as, I think what you're talking about is a topographic survey, and also relative to the boundary lines, and on other portions of the property, not just the shed in relation to the east property line.
Correct. Yeah, I guess before I decide whether those buildings should stay there or not stay there, or whether there is in fact other locations for them that is acceptable, we're getting told, obviously, by 2 different sides of the issue here, that there is or there isn't a proper location for them, that massive trees have to be cut down, and we've heard all the negatives and positives. And right now I'm concerned that we don't have verification on either side of that issue.
And if I can sort of piggyback on that alternate location, the only thing I'm hearing is that's where the shed would go, not the barn or the horse stalls, that it's just the one structure, and I haven't really heard alternate locations for the other structures. So I'm sort of up in the air on that. I mean, take them individually. But I still don't know if that lower area, because I'm hearing from one person that, you know, that you'd still have to get a variance to move there, and you know, staff saying, well, there is enough areas so they wouldn't have to require a variance. So.
Yeah, but I'd like to make a comment on these buildings, and I'd like to piggyback on what our county council just mentioned. I think she was reading my mind, because every parcel is going to have some limitations. I mean, you go out there, you drive out there, and it's got all rolling hills and everything else. Now, if you were allowed zoning to create a parcel that you obviously couldn't build on, it was like this, anything, a house or anything else, it'd be different. But this issue of outbuildings, you know, you can't build as many as you want on any property. I mean, in my opinion, I mean, you've got to at least follow some rules and regulations, but I just like to point that out. It's a little different than you know, the house is permitted, and the secondary home was done and allowed. Now that, you know, accessory buildings for the use of the property, you know.
I have a kind of question here too. To me, it sounded like the pasture is in violation of the ordinance too, but we haven't heard very much about that.
So let me touch on that real quick, and that's why I went and grabbed the pointer here to get to the I have the right. Oh, I knew I was going to do that. Okay, bear with me. I'm sorry.
Where's IT when you need them, huh? You got back to the main page of some kind. It's got our names on it.
Okay, so this is a site plan that we're looking at right now, and our pointer. I might just have to stay up here. Okay, so you have the shed, the barn, then the animal enclosure, if I'm not mistaken, is this area in here. This area, including the two structures, to meet code, would need to be 30 feet from the property line.
So you just sort of blew me out of the water on that one, because I thought if his fence is a property line and you say it's an animal enclosure, is it a pasture? Is it a stall or whatever? Because I'm just assuming if on the property line there's a fence and he has stock can, is not in.
Is there a structure within that pasture?
And within this pasture, no. And that, if I'm not mistaken, Melanie, the pasture there's a code section in the ordinance that prevents that from being closer than 30 feet.
That's correct.
From the property line. So,
what, the fence or
the fence, the actual animal enclosure.
Can I speak to that?
Yeah, because
that area is designated as an animal enclosure, not a pasture. An animal enclosure needs to meet setbacks, and it needs to be 30 feet from the property line. And additionally, that states. Oh, I'm sorry. There's also a code that states that the animal enclosure needs to be further away from the property line than it is to the abutting residence. So there's a residence on the neighboring property, and the animal enclosure is closer to that residence than it is from their property line. So for instance, if that animal enclosure is 20 feet to the abutting residence, then it needs to be at least 20 feet off of their own property line. So Mr. Rogers would have to have it at least 20 feet off of those two property lines.
Question for county council. I'm getting confused here and afraid that we're.
Well, it's one of the issues. Pasture is one of the issues in the.
Yeah, the pasture.
Well, is it, or is it simply the issue that we are determining whether the zoning administrator did his job properly?
Based on
We
the
don't care
information
about
he had at
if
the
he's got
time of
somewhere
the
else to move
zoning
the building,
administrator's
or
hearing.
if he's got
That is correct.
20 foot or 20-foot setback, that's not our call. Our call is, did the zoning administrator use the evidence and determine his findings accordingly?
Based on the facts.
Based on what was
Which are-
available to the zoning administrator at the time of the hearing.
Based on the presented facts that we've been presented with.
Right, so it doesn't really matter if he's got somewhere else to move the building or not. Is the building in the wrong place? Yes. The remedy for that is further down the line. Well, ask county council.
Mr. Gray, Commissioner Gray, pardon me, Commissioner Gray is absolutely correct. The job here for this commission is to determine whether or not the zoning administrator properly denied the appeal. You're basing that evidence on your staff report and also the testimony provided here. And remember, the applicant has, the appellant has the burden of proof to establish that the zoning administrator abused his discretion in denying the variances. So I couldn't articulate it better than the way Commissioner Gray did. It's irrelevant whether you can move the building. You're up above here on a different level of looking at it from the appeal standpoint.
So we don't take into consideration special circumstances? He's
Well, yes.
arguing that he has special circumstances. The county is saying, no, he does not.
Yes, that's correct.
And we're supposed to decide that.
Yes. What you're doing is you're looking at what the zoning administrator stated, which was he couldn't find special circumstances. He found it to be a special privilege. He found it to be detrimental. Don't forget number 4 prong, which is detrimental to the adjoining community and neighbors. That's your 4th prong. And that it wasn't a minimum departure from the zoning code. Those are the 4 prongs of a variance. And what you're here today to determine is whether you've heard evidence that convinces you otherwise, that yes, I see I've been presented evidence here at this appeal hearing to establish there are special circumstances that merit 1, 2, or 3 of these. Remember, you got 3 different requests here.
Right.
As to whether there is, you've heard evidence to refute the zoning administrator's conclusion.
You know, I guess I'm a little puzzled here because the zoning administrator made a conclusion that there was an alternate site, and that's in dispute from the property owner. And so the question of whether the zoning administrator did a proper job or not depends, I guess, on the information in the record. And the information in the record basically mentions that there's an alternate site.
Right, and bear in
we
mind,
don't really have any information on whether or not that site was, how it was reviewed, or, you know, I mean, if he says that he needs to have a variance to use that site, and then has to come back and get a variance for that site.
that's quite possible. And as Commissioner Gray said, that's something down the line. The issue of whether there's an alternate site does bear on whether or not there are special circumstances. Because remember, special circumstances are, is there nowhere on that property due to topography, existing conditions such as, for example, a stream, where an individual could put a structure. It is irrelevant for purposes of this hearing as to whether that structure will fit in, need a variance, will meet setbacks, but it is relevant to the fact that if you have alternate places to put it, then you have to ask yourself the question, if there are alternate places, can I make a finding of special circumstances? That's the central issue you have to determine. And you have to determine whether you feel that there was enough evidence by the zoning administrator to have made the conclusion that no special circumstances. You may disagree based on the evidence presented to you. That's why this appeal is before you.
Okay, and so then, also, I think I heard you say that if it's a residence, there's a different bar than there is for...
No. I didn't mean to indicate that. The easiest example to present for variances tends to be in terms of understanding what it means to enjoy a privilege of an adjoining property in that same zone is looking at what is essentially the privilege of a particular zone. And you generally look at the fundamental use. So in other words, if it was commercial, okay, well, what's a use that you would enjoy or you would have on that particular parcel? So I didn't mean to construe that it only dealt with residences, but there is an issue as to when you look at accessory type structures, barns and the such, that may be something you're allowed on that zone, but is it necessarily a right, or is it perhaps a privilege?
Or, could it be 200 square feet, or...
Exactly.
Or something less smaller?
Mr. Chair, I have a question for Melanie on the alternative site. You seemed a little tentative on that when you were up there. I mean, when he was saying that he would need a variance for that, and you said, I don't believe he would need one. Or how confident are you that there is legitimately a buildable site that would not require a variance?
I have two answers to that. One is I would have to measure it, basically. I'd have to be out there with a measure and measure back from the property line. I didn't have that at the time, so that's something to take into consideration. But I'd also mention that on that map right there, you can see that area that we're talking about, and all of that is graded. And I would say, no, it's to the left there.
It's way over.
So this is the west property line here, and the north property line right there. And as you can see, all this area has been graded. And I would say, based on the fact that this is 1 foot, it looks to me like you can get 30 feet from here and 30 feet from here. And this is graded here. And there's also another slide on this, an older one, that shows a structure right here.
Well, what I'm still trying to get to is, does he have alternatives? The county says yes, he says no. So that's all I'm trying to understand.
Yes, it's that area that I point.
Right.
Yeah, if you refer back to the staff report, what the zoning administrator stated, that it is a 2.4 acre parcel, and there are several areas where they could actually build the structures. That's from the ZA.
For the record, in terms of the discussion on the alternate side, I'd just like to point out that no one on staff is concluding that it can be built without a variance. As Melanie said, you'd have to see the plans, you'd have to see how big the proposed building would be. There are a lot of factors going into that, and that's simply something that's not in front of this commission, nor can anyone here on this side say, yeah, that could be built without a variance. That's simply outside of our scope right now.
But the burden of proof here was on the appellant?
Correct.
To show us that it couldn't be done today if we were to take that into consideration.
If I understand you correctly, the burden of the appellant is to establish that the zoning administrator's denial of the variance was an abuse of discretion, because in fact there is evidence to support the granting of 1, 2, or all 3 of the variances that was in front of the zoning administrator.
Okay. Well, I guess for the first question, whether the zoning administrator did a proper job, I would make the motion that he did.
I'd accept that.
Then are you saying you deny the appeal?
Well, I think we've got to take this in steps, right?
That's what I'm sensing, is if your conclusion is that he had evidence to uphold this decision, then it sounds like the motion you want to make is to make a motion to deny the appeal.
What
Okay.
do you want to do on,
Three?
yeah, take all three
Do you have a list of what we need to deal with?
Because there's three deals. There's
We can deny all of one or all three. Correct.
I think all of them.
And that's a good point that the chair is bringing up.
because I have.
You have three variances, and
Oh, yeah, right.
I don't know how this commission wants to handle this. You can take each one.
Okay, let's do the,
Because my.
okay, well, we can get to you later. Let me finish my motion. We deny the appeal on the
1 foot.
the building, whatever we're calling the building.
I'll
Shed
second
building.
that one, what's known as the shed.
That guy.
You mean the shed, right?
Okay, we have a motion and a second for the denial of the shed. And do roll call?
Yes.
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 Yes?
Yes. Okay, then we can go ahead and
Barn?
take, well, you have the livestock enclosure and then the pole barn or stalls or little, which one, it's, somebody else has
I
to
think
make.
the list is up now.
Yeah. Okay, so then,
We may need some more discussion on the pole barn, I think. I don't know if I really have that one fixed. We've been focusing on the shed, but
well, the shed's been the one that the alternate location is.
Yeah.
It's on the corner of the property. And this,
Well, the discussion is the discussion changed now? He denied variance on the one that we just talked about.
yes,
The other ones came in later, correct? After the first time staff went out there and said, these are also a problem?
That's correct.
So that, did he make a ruling on a variance on those two at the same time as he did the first one?
That's right.
so he
in one
did on
hearing.
these two.
There's one hearing. Oh,
Yeah, so he,
Okay, I just want to get that marked up.
okay, so now it'd be the variance to allow the placement of the 420 square foot barn.
So it's not a matter of replacement, we're just saying, did George look at this property the same way he looked at the first one, and did he go by the rules and do everything properly? So it's the same question on all three.
Denial is on all three,
All right.
the zoning administrator.
Right, and our question is, did George look at all three of them the same way and do it properly? So if we denied the first one, the appeal, we'd almost have to do the other
you
three.
could make the motion if you want.
Trying to get it all
You
in
can
line
challenge us.
here.
I think you go to discussion.
Yeah, and actually I guess there was really no location replacement for the 420 square foot. Now, I was thinking, move it over, but then he's saying that his line from his well, he'd have
Yeah, well,
to set it
we
over.
concrete over water lines constantly,
Yeah.
that's not a question. I'll make a motion that we uphold the denial of the variance for item number 2.
For the barn.
Second.
Okay, roll call.
Mr. Sevison?
Yes.
Mr. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Nader?
Yes.
Mr. Moss?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Rakucci?
Yes.
Mr. Denial?
Yes. Okay, now it's a variance to allow for the placement of animal enclosure on the east side of property line.
I'll make a motion.
It would be north
Well,
and east, north
discussion.
and east.
Yeah, discussion on that, because I do have an issue, because I look at it more as where you have your livestock.
Well, I can agree that you perhaps don't like the idea that your livestock can come right up, or should be allowed to come up, but that's not the question. The question is, did George look at it properly?
No, it's what it's
Right.
called.
Yeah, it's
It's
not a
not-
No,
match.
not
It's
only
a
called, but you have them
It's a
restricted
pin,
there.
if
That's
they
what
call
they're
it.
That's
a
what the
pin.
county's classified as.
That's what the county is.
Yeah, so the distinction would be, if they allowed the horses to graze the whole property, that would be different than.
Or, no, if he put cross fencing anymore.
Cross fence at someplace in, yeah.
Yeah. And
That would be a
this is
pasture.
where he had it, and so it's pasture, because if he took that all the way from there down to the corner, then they can run, and
It was mislabeled on our map as a pasture, which we've subsequently found out.
That it's an animal enclosure which is subject to the rules that George went by, saying that this is not in the right place, correct? Am I following that right?
now.
So he made the same decision on the same evidence on this enclosure as he did on the shed.
Well, I guess for clarification, did the owner of the property call it the animal enclosure, or did George determine that?
I don't know, how do you determine that?
There's actually definitions, and actually I have them right here if you'd like to hear them. But there's a definition for an animal enclosure, and there's a definition for a pasture. And once code enforcement had gone out to the property and reviewed that area, which had had a complaint, it was determined based on the definition that this was an animal enclosure and therefore needed to meet this 30-foot setback.
What is the definition, though, of an animal?
Yeah.
Okay, a definition of a pasture, well, definition of an animal enclosure is any facility within which animals are permanently kept or which are intended primarily for the keeping of animals and which are 5,000 square feet or less in gross area. The pasture, on the other hand, is an area where animals are confined, where the animals feed on growing grasses and herbage, and they must have sustainable vegetation present at all times, and enough residual plant material must be present to provide adequate ground cover for regrowth and erosion control to ensure continued forage production. And so, oh yes, and the term pasture is not intended to indicate denuded, barren ground throughout the pasture area. And upon code enforcement's review of the property, they found that the area was denuded and it did not meet any of this criteria for a pasture, but it did meet the definition of an animal enclosure, and so that's how it was designated animal enclosure.
So if I could add on to what Melanie just said, the place where setbacks come into play is under animal enclosures. It refers to sites 10 acres or less. So the setback is applicable to those parcels, and what it says, in no case shall an enclosure be located closer to any property line that is common with an adjacent parcel than the minimum setback distance required by the zone district for a main dwelling, which that's 30 feet. So it only applies for those, smaller parcels, 10 acres or less.
So according to that, George did exactly what they said.
Okay.
So shall I make a motion now? I move that we deny the appeal on the
Pasture.
no
Animal.
On the animal.
on the animal enclosure.
Okay, and I would second it.
Okay, a roll call?
Mr. Sevison?
Yes.
Mr. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Nader? Yes. Mr. Moss?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Riccucci?
Yes.
Mr. Denio?
Yes. Okay.
We upheld the zoning administrator's decision.
Now we probably have to go through the findings or something?
Read him his rights.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chairman, if you want to state the appeal rights.
Okay, if you want to appeal this, you have 10 calendar days to appeal, and the fee is $546. And it should be made at the planning department. Okay. That's, thank you.